Starting us off with number 10 is the secret Ukrainian prison. So between 2014 and 2016, it's been confirmed that the Security Service of Ukraine, aka the SBU, operated a secret prison located in Kharkiv. Now the prison held inmates the SBU suspected of supporting Russia during its military intervention in Ukraine and the annexation of Crimea. Survivor Mykola Vakara came out after being held at the prison for 600 days. He shared that he was tortured constantly, and the first thing he was told when he arrived was that he would get hit in the chest for every wrong answer he gave. Mykola was kept in a 2 square meter cell that was so cold that water inside it used to turn to ice, which actually caused him to lose his kidney. He was transported back to the prison after a surgery and forced to confess that he supported Russian-backed fighters even when he didn't. Mykola was finally released after Ukraine came under pressure from human rights groups fighting for the prisoner's release. To buy his silence and not say anything about the facility, he was paid a total of $3.80. You could have paid me $1 million and I still would have come clean about everything. At number 8 we have Lexington HSU. Now this top secret high security unit was created in the 1980s and was a female only prison. It housed any and all political prisoners that were accused of attempting to overthrow or disrupt the US government. Infamous inmates include Sylvia Baraldini, who fought for Puerto Rican independence, and Susan Rosenberg, who supported the Black Liberation Army. Now the prison itself was so secret it actually existed completely underground in total isolation from the world. External communication was radically restricted, as you can probably imagine. Prisoners were strip searched daily, subjected to constant fluorescent lighting and sensory deprivation, and all of that was done so they'd be worn down enough for an ideological transformation. It was closed down in 1988 after protests came in from Amnesty International. Filling at number 7th slot is the salt pit in Afghanistan, and surprisingly I'd heard of this one before despite it being secretly run by the CIA. The salt pit was meant to hold inmates suspected of having links with terrorists or involved in any terrorist activity. The prison itself used to be a brick factory, so as you can imagine its cells are hella small and have no toilets or windows. Most inmates have one bucket in their room that they use for all their excretory needs, and for a bed they sleep on the cold floor naked. All of them are subjected to inhumane treatment and punishments like frequent mock executions. Can you even imagine the trauma of having to see them pretend to kill someone or them jokingly telling you that they're gonna kill you? Like, that is disgusting. The guards also play super loud music during the day as another form of psychological torture. Now after all that, only one death has been confirmed by the prison, and the inmate was chained above his head, stripped, beaten and drenched, and then he died of hypothermia the next day. His family was never informed, and that is bloody sad. Now at number 6 is Penny Lane. Now this is one of the many secret prisons located at Guantanamo Bay. Opening its doors in 2003, Penny Lane is not your average prison. Just imagine the prison Pablo Escobar built for himself, and then you'll have more of an accurate idea of what it's like. The inmates live a life of luxury with access to comfy beds, a shower, a TV, and mind you, everyone there is a confirmed terrorist. It's unique because only terrorists undergoing double agent training are allowed to stay there. When their training is complete, they're sent back to their terrorist hub and have to send inside info back to the CIA. And in exchange, they get millions of dollars, which is a pretty good deal given you're a terrorist. Sometimes it works, sometimes the terrorists just go back to their group and never contact the CIA again. It's really 50-50. Coming in at number 5 are Chinese black jails. These secret prisons are illegally run by individual Chinese provinces and local governments. Now if someone has a grievance, for example, they have to report it to their provincial or local government, and if they don't get the justice they wanted, then they're allowed to send that same report to the central government, which is like the daddy government. But it's sort of an inception situation, since the governments are low-key competing with each other trying to be the best one. The number of reports coming in from each province decides how effective that government is, so to avoid being deemed ineffective, these local governments seek out the people who send in reports to the central government and do very, very bad things to them. The government's like, you ain't no damn snitch! Get in jail! We're in this together! Now they currently employ over 10,000 people to kidnap, torture and detain their reporting citizens. The black prisons they're put in themselves are usually vacant homes, guest houses or psychiatric wards. In 2009 it was confirmed that there are around 73 black jails inside Beijing alone, and the central government is very privy to that fact. They're just like, well, that's none of my business though. Carry on. At At number 4 is the USP Marion. This secret prison was built back in 1963 as a high-tech replacement for Alcatraz. Like, how horrific of a prison do you have to be if you're the high-tech version of Alcatraz? Alcatraz was bad enough. Now, 500 Alcatraz prisoners were transferred there and were forced into a behavior modification program. Prisoners shared that these sessions were more like psychological attack sessions. In 1973, the prisoners protested against the beating of a fellow inmate, which led to even stricter programs, one of which being the control unit. Now, the control unit made the USP Marion famous, and it essentially involved you being in solitary confinement for 22 hours at a time. When you hear the phrase Marion model, that literally translates to psychological torture in every way, shape, and form. After 2 guards were killed in the early 80s, the entire prison was transformed into a giant control unit. And if I was in that place, I would go crazy. Can you imagine everyone in there is in just solitary confinement all the time? No! That's like my worst nightmare. Not being able to talk. Hell no.
In our number 10 spot, we have the Bodmin Jail. The Bodmin Jail is located in Cornwall, England. This jail opened in 1779, and in its most active days, King George III would hold more than 150 criminals in there. Quite the overcrowded prison of the time, although people have long held the belief that King George III was mad, so I suppose this decision could be the result of this. Apparently, over 100 years, 55 executions took place in Bodmin. A notable execution was a woman named Selina Wadge, whom many have believed that she still haunts the grounds today. Screaming and banging on the walls has been known to be heard at this prison. Now, this prison was closed and abandoned as a prison in 1926, but eventually it was actually turned into a tourist destination, so you can actually visit this prison. But honestly, at your own risk. You may run into the ghost of Selena, and some say she isn't quite as nice as Casper the Friendly Ghost, if you catch my drift. In our number 9 spot, we have the Atlanta Prison Farm. Located in Atlanta, Georgia, this is a prison that was caught on fire in 2009, and the firefighters did not even try to extinguish the flames. Yeah, it definitely wasn't a treasured landmark, that's for sure. The prison is a little different than the others, as it was surrounded by acres of land, and the prisoners would farm their food. This place was known for being overcrowded and having war criminals and people who were either wrongfully imprisoned or imprisoned for minor crimes. After many moons of being shut down and abandoned, eventually this place became a bit of an urban exploration adventure, as people thought it to be haunted, and even ghost hunters would often visit it. But honestly, just looking at the pictures of it, it's just so worn out and it reeks of low vibes that it looks like it would attract ghosts. You are prohibited from visiting this place, so don't even think about it. I am your YouTube mother. Nah, I'm too young. I am your YouTube older sister, and I encourage you to make good choices and not go, okay? In our number 8 spot, we have the Old Salem Jail. The Old Salem Jail is located, of course, in Salem, Massachusetts. Home of the Hocus Pocus witches, of course. And yes, the town is known for, oh, just a little old thing as, you know, the Salem witch trials. Ever heard of it? Well, if you haven't, Google it. It was quite the historical American event. That town attracts, you know, just the creepiest things. And so it wouldn't be surprising to hear about a jail that was known to be haunted. This jail apparently had stories from it that sounded too gory to be true that people didn't even want to tell them. It closed in 1991, and after being abandoned for a few decades, eventually a hotel brand bought it and turned it into luxury apartment flats. But apparently it doesn't matter how beautiful they make it look, the ghosts from the jail are still around there and people can still hear their cries. One of these days I'm gonna have to visit these prisons in the hopes that I'll be able to hear these supernatural cries. Not that I like people crying, but I want to hear a ghost. You know you want to too. In our number 7 spot, we have the Holmesburg Prison. This prison has to be the worst abandoned prison in the world. I'm serious when I say that the fact that this existed and such inhumane practices were afoot makes me sick to my stomach, to be honest. The prison is located in Pennsylvania, USA, and it was active from 1896 to 1995. The fact that this prison was still open when I was a kid makes me the most uncomfortable. I think our ability to be compassionate has tripled in the last 25 years. Anyways, this is a jail where the prisoners were essentially boiled alive. I'm not joking. The prison was built out of stone and it had large steam radiators, and the wardens would make the temperature go up to 200 degrees, and some of the prisoners would literally die from the heat. To arguably make it worse, the prisoners eventually became testing subjects for biochemical, pharmaceutical, and dermatological weapons. So yeah, it totally makes sense to hear that people believe it to be deeply haunted. I bet. This is one of the darkest prisons by far. In our number 6 spot, we have the Ararat County Jail. In Ararat, Victoria in Australia, there was once a very known jail, the Ararat County Jail, that is now known for its shrieking cries, specifically from an area of the jail called the J Ward. The jail opened in 1861 and was originally intended as a Goldfields prison, but in the 1880s it was turned into a maximum security psychiatric facility for the criminally insane. Not only do people say they still hear the shrieking cries believed to be from the prisoners, but also moans and rapid footsteps are often heard. Apparently when they are heard, it's hard to know that they aren't real, as the footsteps sound so real and human-like. In our number 5 spot, we have the Wyoming Territorial Prison. This prison was built in 1872 and was made to confine the growing number of criminals in the area. But not all went exactly according to plan. People kept escaping. This is wild to me. I didn't realize that any prison had a genuine problem with this. I thought when people escaped it was like a one-off thing. Anyways, yep, people would escape, and they had a bit of an overcrowding issue as well. A famous name from the prison though is a man named Julius Greenwald, who was sentenced for taking the life of his wife. He apparently had a quote-unquote expert hand when it came to rolling cigars, and boy would he smoke a lot of them. Apparently Julius's cigar scent can still be smelt at the prison in the place where he died in 1901. Passing away in 1901 from heart failure, Julius's ghost still lingers about in the place he died. It is said that you can also smell the cigar scent in the corridors leading to where he died. Interesting. Well, smoke and cigar/cigarette scents do tend to linger, so it makes sense. In our number 4 spot, we have the Carabanchel Prison. The Carabanchel prison, located in Madrid, Spain, was originally constructed by political prisoners after the Spanish Civil War between 1940 to 1944. It was known as one of the biggest prisons in Europe until it was closed down in 1998. The prisoners were made to do slave labor when it was active, and after it was closed, it became known as an abandoned haunted building. In 2008, the Spanish government decided that it needed to be destroyed because no one should go onto the grounds. Probs because it was that haunted, but most likely because it was just a sad part of their history that they want to forget. Apparently a hospital and apartments are now in the area, and it hasn't been confirmed if people ever feel any paranormal activity, but we're gonna say probably. In our number 3 spot, we have the William Porter Reformatory. The William Porter Reformatory is located in Tokaji, South Africa. This is a bit of a disturbing prison because it was not exactly for adults. Most of the prisoners were actually quite young, which honestly makes me ill to think about. They were kept in isolation cells, and for what purpose? Oh, just a racially driven one. To further the separation between the black and white working class community, and to teach the prisoners to not interact and to socially know their place. Thankfully, this horrific place was closed down in 1910, but of course the energy and sadness must still surround the building. Seeing the pictures of this place honestly breaks my heart and makes me the most sad. In our number 2 spot, we have the Old Charleston Jail. The Old Charleston Jail is a jail that was built in 1802 in South Carolina, USA. This is an abandoned place that you may actually want to visit if you're someone who's very into supernatural phenomena, as this is a place that is known for its ghostly encounters. $100. Ooh, yeah, I want to go. This jail was actually home to a very notable prisoner, Lavinia Fisher. Lavinia and her husband, John Fisher, were owners of a Charleston inn called the 6 Mile Wayfarer House, and they were sent to prison as apparently they were luring businessmen into their inn and then killing them and stealing their belongings. They say that her ghost is haunting this jail, and reports of many supernatural noises, smells, and sightings have occurred there. So maybe you don't want to visit this place. Something about this woman's story makes me think she's the type of ghost to want to possess you. But I have a very active imagination, so who knows. If I ever visit, I'ma go straight to a priest and get an exorcism afterwards. That's what I would do. And finally, in our number 1 spot, we have the Moundsville, West Virginia Penitentiary. Yes, of course, I have to have this one on the list. This place is one of the most known prisons of all time. The West Virginia Penitentiary is located, of course, in the state of Virginia, USA, and it is most known for its brutal punishments. It was active from 1876 to 1995, and during that time the prisoners experienced beatings so bad that some passed away from them. They also experienced electrocution, and yes, they also practiced hanging the prisoners for a very long time as well. The prison was also known for having many escapees and causing riots. The violence and the inhumane practices were inevitably what led to it being shut down. Many people believe the prison to be extremely haunted, so it is not advised to go and visit if you are fearful of seeing a ghost.
Starting off this countdown, we have Eastern State Penitentiary. Built in 1829, Eastern State Penitentiary was known for housing some of the biggest criminals, such as Al Capone. The conditions in this prison weren't the best. Prisoners were kept in complete solitude, seeing nobody else besides the guards. Whenever they would leave their cell, guards would cover their heads so that they couldn't see anyone else and no one could see them. That alone would drive them insane. But they didn't stop there. The guards would often torture the inmates by soaking them in cold water and then letting them dry outside during the winter time. The prison closed in 1971, and now apparently the ghosts of the prisoners haunt the walls, seeking revenge on the guards. In our 9th spot, we have Atlanta Prison Farm. The Atlanta Prison Farm, also known as the Honor Farm, first opened its doors in around 1918. The plan for this prison was for criminals to work off their sentences by doing labor work. This was only for the prisoners that were deemed trustworthy enough. In fact, they really believed that this would be a solid plan, so there were hardly any security. However, it didn't turn out to be such a good idea. There were a lot of gangs at this prison, which resulted in a lot of prisoners getting hung and killed. The prison closed its doors in 1995. But in October of 2009, a fire burnt a large section of the prison. Firefighters didn't even care at all. They didn't try to even attempt to extinguish the fire. Now what remains of the prison is badly vandalized, and pictures of the inside show that it's not the safest place to visit. In our 8th spot, we have HM Pentridge Prison. Her Majesty's Prison Pentridge, or HM Prison Pentridge, was an Australian prison established in 1851. Now the problem with this prison was that it was meant to hold 650 prisoners and only 100 guards. But soon the prison became overcrowded with thousands of prisoners. In fact, a large percentage of the prison population died inside the prison. This was due to monthly stabbings, bludgeonings, and bashings. The prison closed on May 1st, 1997 due to a bunch of riots and scandals. But because so many people died there, they actually had to bury them on the prison's ground. Over the years, bones of the prisoners have been found in and around the prison. So I suggest not going there unless you want to stumble upon some human remains. Coming in at number 7, we have Moundsville Prison. Moundsville, West Virginia Penitentiary was built in 1876, and it looks a lot like a medieval fortress. But this prison wasn't designed to hold a lot of inmates. They each were meant to have their own 5-foot by 7-foot cell. That's extremely small. But eventually overcrowding became an issue, and up to 3 inmates were placed in one cell. 2 were on super small bunk beds, while the other slept on a mattress on the floor by the toilet. The conditions weren't the best. that's for sure. Before the prison was abandoned in 1995, a lot of death sentences were carried out there. 85 men were hung and 9 were electrocuted. This prison saw the worst of the worst criminals. One of the more notable inmates was Harry Powers, the Lonely Hearts Killer. He would use newspaper ads to lure lonely women to him, with ads saying that he was looking for love and marriage, but instead he would rob and kill them. Now, Tom Stiles, the caretaker of the penitentiary, said that multiple inmates would complain about the prison being haunted. So even before criminals were killed there, the prison was already haunted by other spirits. Now it's even more haunted with the ghosts of the criminals as well. Making our way down the list at number 6, we have Old Essex County Jail. Located in New Jersey, this jail was built in 1937 and has a very creepy Victorian style to it. Over the time, the prison expanded and had its own cafeteria, hospital, auditorium, and gallows in the yard to hang the murderers. The prison closed in 1970 and now is deemed very unsafe to trespassers. Some of the floors are at risk for caving in at any second. Plus, the walls are now covered in creepy vandalism and graffiti. And inmates' files are now scattered all over the floor of the auditorium, along with empty tear gas containers and shotgun shells. So what really went on in that prison? We're now at our 5th and halfway mark with Wyoming Territorial Prison. Built in 1872, this prison is one of the oldest buildings in Wyoming. From 1872 to 1890, it was a federal penitentiary, and from 1890 to 1901, it was a state prison. But this prison faced a lot of issues. The first one being that there were a lot of jailbreaks. Within the first 2 years of operation, out of the 44 prisoners there, 11 of them managed to escape. Then over the course of the next couple of years, they struggled with overcrowding. They also had to deal with a number of ghost fires. Yeah, fires would start out of nowhere in the prison. Over the years, the prison was used less and less, and actually was under capacity. At one point, they only had 3 prisoners. Now, the prison was famous for housing the murderer Julius Greenwald, who is said to haunt the area. In fact, he was known for being really good at rolling cigars. And if you visit the prison today, the faint smell of his cigar smoke will follow you around. Moving on at number 4, we have the Garcia Moreno Prison. Located in Ecuador, this abandoned prison is nightmare fuel. Inside of the prison, there are a bunch of haunting images that the inmates left behind. So to pass time, they would make murals or sketches on the walls. Most of them are pretty dark and gruesome, showcasing their misery from being locked up. So originally, this prison was built to only hold 300 inmates, but it reached 8 times its capacity, squeezing inmates inside. They weren't living in the best conditions, and by taking a tour of the area, you can see it for yourself firsthand, if you dare. I don't recommend it. In our 3rd spot, we have Alcatraz. Of course, this is probably one of the most famous prisons in the world. Alcatraz was a maximum security federal prison built from 1910 to 1912. It first served as a prison for military prisoners, but over the years, it was known to be home of the biggest and baddest criminals. It was also known as being an inescapable prison, but the prison closed in 1963 since it was getting too costly to run. Now it's rumored to be very haunted. Apparently, prisoners were often tortured there by guards with chains, knives, and tasers. Lots of prisoners actually died while locked up there. Legend goes that if you visit the prison, you will be able to hear the sounds of endless weeping and screams. Others have reported hearing music coming from one of the cells, and even got locked in a cell by a trickster ghost. So yeah, definitely do not recommend you visit this prison unless you want to end up behind bars. Literally. Coming in at number 2, we have Port Arthur Prison. Built in 1833, Port Arthur Prison was referred to as Australia's Alcatraz. It was deemed inescapable, and it was known to house only the biggest and baddest criminals. From 1833 to 1853, Port Arthur was a place for convicted British criminals. Rumor has it that these prisoners were psychologically tortured there. It operated under the principle of isolation, silence, and control. As a result, a lot of prisoners were driven mad in solitary confinement. The prison was shut down in 1877, and then in 1895 and 1897, devastating fires destroyed some of of the prison. Here's the thing, the prison and the entire land is said to be cursed. In 1997, a man named Martin Bryant killed 35 people and wounded 23 more on the land. This massacre is considered the worst massacre in the modern history of Australia. As a result, the prison and the surrounding area is pretty much abandoned. And in our number 1 spot we have Holmesburg Prison. The Holmesburg Prison opened in 1896 and was nicknamed the Terror Dome, and you'll understand why shortly. Tons of very horrific incidents occurred at this prison. From 1938, half of the prisoners went on a hunger strike because of complaints about the food. As punishment, the leaders of the strike were taken to a building that had several cells lined with radiators and steam pipes. The windows and air ducts were closed off, and they raised the temperatures in the building to nearly 200 degrees. This happened during an August heat wave. As a result, several of the prisoners died from being boiled alive. Others suffered from horrific burns. But that's not all. One of the prison doctors would conduct unethical experiments on the prisoners, exposing them to herpes, radiation, psychoactive drugs, and more. Then in 1970, a riot took place in the prison. The inmates were armed with meat cleavers, knives, and makeshift pitchforks. They then went around trashing the dining hall and killing each other. Then in 1973, the prison's warden and the deputy were stabbed to death by the inmates. Finally, the prison closed in 1995, and due to its horrific past, no one wants to visit there.
In our number 9 spot, we have the Kingston Penitentiary. In Kingston, Ontario, Canada, there is a former maximum security prison called the Kingston Penitentiary. I actually visited this prison when I was a kid, and I remember being terrified. It was so spooky from the outside. Anyway, Kingston Pen has a ton of stories told by people that have formerly worked there and people that have visited the prison. Stories such as feeling cold in strange places to experiencing gut feelings to leave where you are right now. There are stories and sightings of a ghost of an old staff member by the name of William Wentworth, who goes up and down the halls and locks the cell doors. He was killed by what is assumed to be a prisoner. However, his killer was never actually caught. He'll probably haunt the place until his killer is caught, because that's some major unfinished business. In our number 8 spot, we have the Maxwell Street Police Station. Known for being one of the most violent and brutal police stations, it is located in a neighborhood called Bloody Maxwell in Chicago. So if that doesn't say it all, then I don't know what to tell you. The city apparently was flooded with mobsters, and the police station was filled with corruption. The dungeon in the basement is where the paranormal rumors come from. It was known as a place for torture, and most criminals would never leave the station after going in there. People have reported the rattling of handcuffs on cell bars, as well as screams from past prisoners. It closed in 1997, and fun fact, the cast of Chicago PD get to hang out with the ghost all the time as it is filmed there. In our number 7 spot, we have the Mansfield, Ohio Reformatory. The Mansfield, Ohio Reformatory was built between 1886 to 1910 and closed in 1990. So many of these prisons closed in 1990, there must have been a huge shift in the prison world in terms of how the prisoners were treated and whatnot at that time. Anyways, this prison is famous for being the inspiration behind the movie Shawshank Redemption, one of my mom's personal favorites, along with Schindler's List. She likes to cry. It is known for being haunted, and so I had to put it on this list. Witnesses have reported paranormal activity in the basement where the solitary confinement cells were. People have reported seeing ghosts, hearing screams and moans from the former prisoners, as well as the haunting of one of the warden's wives who was apparently fatally injured at the prison. In our number 6 spot, we have the Tower of London. Apparently, it is known to be one of the most haunted places in London. It was meant to be a safe place for the royal family at first, then became a dark, horrifying place for prisoners. There are apparently thousands of ghost sightings here, and among them is Thomas A. Becket, who is believed to have caused problems with some of the construction with the tower. But apparently Queen Anne Boleyn is one of the most spotted ghosts. Many have reported seeing a headless body body walking through the tower corridors, which would make sense as the tower is close to the site where she was executed. This is wild. I really want to go there now. I want to see a headless ghost. It would be better if it was nearly headless, like, you know, Harry Potter's nearly headless Nick, but whatever, this will do. In our number 5 spot, we have Old Richmond Jail. Located in Tasmania, Australia, this isn't the most widely known jail, but it is definitely one of the scariest, it seems. This place was built around 1825, and it has a whipping yard, a cookhouse, solitary confinement cells, and basically anything you can imagine a scary prison would have. It has many ghost sightings and is believed to be heavily haunted. From sightings of a lady in a pink dress, to ghost young ones, to feeling cold shivers and hearing strange noises, there have been too many encounters to count. Best to stay away from touring this prison unless you love ghosts, then never mind. Proceed. In our number 4 spot, we have the Eastern State Penitentiary. This is a prison that operated as a sort of solitary confinement. It opened in 1829 and was active until 1971. It was meant to psychologically harm the prisoners, with the noise being kept to a bare minimum. Many who misbehaved were tortured in various ways, including what was called the mad chair, where inmates were strapped to a chair so tightly that their circulation was cut off. So yeah, it's understandable that it is props haunted. Many have reported hearing crying, screaming, whispers, and even footsteps around the prison. People have also reported seeing dark shadows, and even Al Capone once complained that he was haunted by a ghost named James Clark, who was a victim of the St. Valentine's Massacre. In our number 3 spot, we have the Old Geelong Jail. It could be pronounced Geelong. I don't know. I tried looking it up. I think it's Geelong, we're going with it. Another Australian prison that is said to be pretty fierce. It was built between 1849 to 1864 and was open until 1991. In addition to being a jail, this place was also used by the Australian Army as a post-World War II detention center. It was also an industrial school for girls. So yeah, there is a mixed bag of ghosts at this place. Over 500 plus deaths occurred in this place. People have claimed that particular areas of the jail are haunted by a demon, as well as apparently an old guard haunts this place. In fact, there are reports of sightings in shock blocks, the walkways, the morgue, and even the kitchen, and it seems that perhaps it's more than one demon that haunts this place. Strange smells and violent attacks have been reported, along with screams. Well, thank the Lord this place has closed up shop. I wouldn't wish a ghost haunting on even my worst enemy. In our number 2 spot, we have the San Lucas Prison. This is a prison that is located on the San Lucas Island, which is a Costa Rican island. Many prisoners who were sent there saw the death penalty. The prison is notoriously known for its extremely poor living conditions and torture methods. Apparently, about 60 men would be crammed into a cell at a time. There were cells underground used for solitary confinement, and get this, they were typically flooded with water and sewage. Just disgusting. Yeah, if I was a prisoner that was put in a room with sewage, you best believe I'm coming back to haunt every one of those horrible people that worked there that clearly should have been prisoners themselves. Did I mention the artwork on the walls that was made from human blood? Yeah, forgot that one. It's known to be haunted by a priest and a nurse that worked there, as well as obviously the former inmates. People continue to hear screaming, begging, and crying men till this day. In our number 1 spot, we have the West Virginia State Penitentiary. The prison is so haunted that they even offer ghost tours at this point. Well, might as well capitalize on it. I would. Apparently, they also offer escape room type events, and that sounds horrible to me. First off, it's a real prison, and second, this is a prison that is known for its ghosts. What fun! Let's pretend to be prisoners and escape a real cell and hang out with the ghosts for an hour. Nah thanks, honey. Anyways, this prison is known for having the worst of the worst criminals and many executions. So many of the prisoners were killed by other prisoners, and what is suspected as by some of the guards as well. It is known as one of the most haunted prisons in the United States. Most of the ghost sightings comes from the North Hall, where the most dangerous criminals were kept, where people have reported shadows and footsteps. Apparently also the Hole and the Sugar Shack underground have many reports of people feeling panic when down there and a paranoid feeling of being watched. I hope that's not where the escape rooms are.
Number 10. Moundsville Penitentiary, West Virginia. Oh, take me home, country roads to the place I belong, West Virginia. Okay, that's enough of that. I think me singing will haunt your dreams more than any of the places on this list. Well, first we have the Moundsville Penitentiary. This place opened in 1879 and quickly became one of the most violent prisons in America. That's basically being the heavyweight champion of violent prisons. In the time that this prison was open, there was 36 homicides and a bunch of executions. So you better believe that this place is packed full of ghosts that walk the halls. One of the most famous ghosts wasn't even an inmate. People say they've seen the ghost of a maintenance man who used to work there. He was brutally beaten to death by the inmates because he would inform the guards when the inmates were misbehaving. Snitches, get stitches, baby. The game is the game. The Moundsville Penitentiary is known as the most haunted place on earth. So the moral of the story goes, don't snitch or you're gonna end up a ghost around a bunch of the people that you snitched on. Number 8. Cripple Creek Jail. When the population of a town starts to skyrocket, a few things will always happen. Rent goes up, and then you have to move into a place with 67 roommates. Jobs disappear, so you better behave yourself at work unless you want to start selling off your respect for money. And of course, local anemones are usually not equipped to deal with anything. That's what happened in Cripple Creek in the late 1800s when the gold rush hit. People's lust for striking rich overnight shot this town up from 1,500 to 50,000 people in a very short period of time. This of course made the crime shoot through the roof and then forced a small town to try and find ways to manage all the prisoners. This led to many deaths at the Cripple Creek Jail, both on the sides of inmates and guards. It's actually said that one of the most famous ghosts hanging around the jail today is that of a female guard. People say she stayed behind to keep the other ghosts in prison. Give this girl a raise, she has allegiance even in death, baby. Number 7. Eastern State Penitentiary. This penitentiary in Philadelphia was open for 42 years and had the reputation for being one of the most brutal prisons of all time. Inmates were treated worse than cattle. They would be kept in near total isolation for 23 hours a day. The rooms that they were kept in had 0 windows. That means no sunlight is getting through. You gotta get that vitamin D. Staying away from the sun for a long time is really bad for your health. Well, I mean, so is going to jail, but whatever. Guards would also torture inmates in brutal ways. One thing they would do is take inmates who had misbehaved and put them in a place called the Hole. This was a dark pit in the ground with 0 light and hardly any room to move. While in the hole, they would be given just enough food and water to survive, and after their time was up, the guards would pull out their nearly lifeless bodies and throw them back into a secluded cell. Many inmates went mad or died from the isolation, and ghosts have been spotted all over the prison, especially in the rooms where these tortures would take place. Number 6. Ararat County Jail. Now we're going down under to Australia. A country built by criminals must have had some of the worst prisons of all time. Imagine being such a monster that you get locked up when you're living around criminals. You would have to be a baby eater dog kicker or something terrible like that. Well, the Ararat County Jail was a place where you would send these kinds of people. What made this place especially terrible is that it was a prison for the criminally insane. So there were all sorts of treatments performed on patients. And by treatments, I mean lobotomies without anesthesia, along with shock treatment, and an array of other horrible things that no human should have to endure. It's said that you can hear the screams of people who were tortured there to this day. One of the most famous ghosts that lurk the halls is that of Nurse Carrie, a nurse who defends her ward and tries to stop people from coming in. She still doesn't want the public to know about the terrible things they would do to patients. Well, the word's out, Carrie. Everyone knows you're a turd. Number 5. The London Tower. This is probably the most famous one on the list. The London London Tower is over 900 years old and is a major hotspot for tourists. If you're a ghost, this is the place to haunt. You get to scare thousands of people every year and probably photobomb everybody. Imagine being the ghost that everyone talks about at the London Tower. How glamorous. It was originally made as a safe haven for the royal family, but got converted into a prison not long after that. Everything went down from there. Prisoners would be tortured, tried, and executed all in the big brick building. So you can imagine there's some major bad mojo floating around. The tower is constantly guarded by the royal guard, and when new guards are stationed there, many of them have reported a crushing sensation in their chest. I'm guessing the ghosts want to see if you're a punk weenie before they let you work there. The most famous ghost is probably that of Queen Anne Boleyn, one of the wives of Henry VIII. She was beheaded in the London Tower. Very fancy. Number 4. Ohio State Reformatory. For those of you who are movie buffs, you are really going to like this one because this is where they filmed Shawshank Redemption. Yeah, one of the greatest movies of all time. And if you like hostile encounters with ghosts, like being shoved or yelled at, then this is the place for you. You have no excuse not to check it out. The place was built in Mansfield, Ohio between the years of 1886 and 1910. This place was a hoot and a holler when it went up and quickly got the reputation for having some of the worst conditions of any prison. Jolly gee, sign me up, mister. In fact, in 1910 the prison was shut down because the conditions were inhumane. My god, it sounds like a great vacation spot. Now they just keep it open for ghost tours. If you decide to go there, you should prepare yourself for everything from phones malfunctioning to cold spots to straight up being pushed. You know what they say about these Ohio State ghosts? They are great hosts. Number 2. Kuroska Naval Port Prison. Let's run over to the Soviet prison that was opened in the year 1900. I wouldn't want to get thrown in a Russian prison now, man. Imagine back then. They probably didn't even have blankets. You probably kept yourself warm through mental toughness. This place was built in Latvia and used as a detention center for the Russian military who broke some war laws. I don't know what war laws are, but you can leave them in the comments. It's stated on the record that no one ever escaped this jail, but it was built in the middle of nowhere. So if you ever did escape this jail, you would probably just freeze to death or be eaten by a bear. Now you can go there to do something they call Extreme Night, where they let you spend the night in the jail. A place that is haunted by dead war criminals? That's a hard pass for me. And number 1 on the list, the Shepton Mallet Prison. We're gonna top off this list with the Shepton Mallet Prison in Somerset, England. Until the year 2013, this prison was the oldest operating prison in the world. It was built in the year 1625. I didn't even know that was legal. If I was there, I would keep asking the question, is this up to code? Even though I knew the answer was no, that would be like my little dad joke. I would tell everyone until someone shut me up by stabbing me in the liver. This place is so old that there are even unmarked graves around the prison from prisoners who died from smallpox. Goddamn, smallpox got you while you were in prison? That's a huge bummer. The prison is famous for housing some of the most dangerous prisoners in all of England and is also super haunted. There was even an attack where a guard was assaulted by an invisible assailant and got burned.